Hi, just a sound check, just a sound check. I don't need this. Hello and welcome to Temple Emanu-El, especially to our visitors for tonight's event. My name is Dr. Vicki Lockman, and I am the chair of the Social Justice Committee. We are sponsoring this event for you. You have already met many of my wonderful members of my committee as they were greeters and registering you as you came in. Our co-sponsor for this event is Temple Emanu-El's Israel Committee. We want to thank them for their support, and I especially want to thank Nina Levitt, who is the chair of that committee. But I want you to know this event would not have been possible without the dedicated work of 3 people who really are the people who are sponsoring this event tonight, literally. Jaja Brown, the event chair, brought forth the idea to our committee and made the arrangements from the beginning to now to give you the pleasure of Rabbi Pessner tonight. You will meet her in the closing remarks. The other key sponsors are Jack and Fran Braverman, who have worked side by side with her. In a moment, Jack will introduce Rabbi Pessner. The format of this event is that Rabbi Pessner will speak for about 20, a little more maybe, minutes, and then he will be taking questions up here from the podium. What he's going to do is rephrase the question that you have asked. And please, questions, not comments. Questions, okay? And then he'll do that for about 20 minutes or so. And then, guess what? After the event is over, we hope that you will join us in Benderson Hall, which is that hall right back there behind those doors, for a dessert reception for about an hour. Okay? It is time for you to enjoy these delectable desserts that have been brought in for you, as well as conversation with other people who value the pursuit of social justice. Thank you for making the time to hear this inspirational spiritual teacher. I now turn the mic over to Rabbi Glickman to just say a few words.
We want to say special welcome to so many members of our greater community that are here today joining the members of Temple Emanu-El. We want to say special greeting. We have leaders of Temple Sinai here in Sarasota, their rabbi and cantor, rabbi and other members of a congregation in Sun City who are here today. We have members of the Sarasota Ministerial Association. Tom, I saw you, but I didn't get a chance to say hi. Welcome to our temple tonight. We're so glad to have all of you with us here. And tonight is a night of inspiration for us to hear the call of the Torah and of our prophets, to not stand idly by when we know there is suffering, when we see injustice, that we must act and stand up. This call so essential to Judaism, so essential to the good human impulse, is one that is embodied and lived out by our speaker tonight, who represents not just the goodness of his own character, but the whole movement of Reform Judaism. We are not alone as we sit here in this congregation, in this sanctuary. We are part of an entire movement of hundreds of thousands of Jews like us, and that feels very good. It feels good to look around the room and see people who care. That feels very good. And if you like this tonight, don't make it a one-night thing, but rather join Vicky and all of those very nice people who greeted you and sign up for our social justice committee so that you can take part in righteous action with fellow passionate people of goodness. And it's an opt-in, so you have to sign in to get all of the messages and to get all of the actions. So opt in, sign in, and may tonight be the beginning of something beautiful, a new chapter and a new pathway in your life. And on behalf of all of us, we want to say a very special thanks to Yaja, who made all of this possible, and a tribute to her beloved Don. Donald Brown was a man who led with love, with kindness, and with decency always. And for us to be thinking of him tonight is a blessing for all of us. Thank you, Yaja, for this gift tonight. And now, my friend, where is Jack Braverman? Jack, please come on up.
I'm not the polished speaker that the previous ones or the one who is following me will be, but I've known Rabbi Pesner for a very long time, almost 30 years. Rabbi Pesner was a very, very young associate congregational rabbi at Temple Israel in Westport, Connecticut, nearly 30 years ago when I first met him. He ministered to our congregation at Temple Israel in Westport, bringing a light and a joy and fun to the old and the young and to everyone in between. Though he was very young himself, through his own deep spirituality and talent, Rabbi Pesner made himself a much loved and treasured member of our congregation almost immediately. He ministered to us all, comforting the bereaved, sat beside those who were ill, and danced and celebrated with us at our simchas. I had the honor of working closely with Rebbe Jonah, to create a spiritual healing service for Yom Kippur. Westport, Connecticut at that time was a suburb, and now, of New York City, and many of our members commuted into New York daily, and many had worked at the World Trade Center on 9/11. We lost many of our 1,800 members that day. That Yom Kippur healing service that Jonah was instrumental in forming and creating out of some amorphous writing was used that year before a grieving and openly sobbing congregation. It managed to bring some much-needed light and hope at a very dark time. Jonah probably isn't aware that that healing service he helped create was used for many, many years after he left for Boston. He probably doesn't know that the spiritual light that he awakened in that congregation and in me left an afterglow that warmed our hearts and touched our souls for many, many years, long after he had moved on to Boston. Jonah Pesner is still at heart a congregational rabbi. He was named by Newsweek as one of the most influential rabbis in America. The congregation that he ministers to now has merely expanded to the Reformed congregations worldwide, a congregation of some 1.8 million members, of which we at Temple Israel are proud members. Jonah Pesner is a true inspirational leader and a tireless advocate for social justice. Through his work as director of the Reform Action Center, RAC, Rabbi Pesner works every day to spread the light of our Jewish values by working and advocating on our behalf for the issues that make us who we are as Reformed Jews. He is devoted to fighting for those Jewish values on the ground by standing up against anti-Semitism and hate, promoting civil rights, racial and economic justice, religious freedom, reproductive rights, immigration reform, and gun control. He's a very, very busy guy. It's a lot. He knows he can't do this all alone. So Rabbi Pesner is dedicated to awakening that passionate spirit that lives quietly, even now, within us all. A passionate spirit that, once awakened, will grow within us and inspire each of us to be our very best selves, to actually live our Jewish values, to stand up, to be the one to work towards uniting the peoples of the world, to inspire those that we ourselves touch to link arms and to walk together towards a wholeness and a justice that we can all prosper in, living our best lives and sharing equally. Let's please give Rabbi Pesner a warm, loving, loud, and very raucous welcome to Temple Emanu-El.
Thank you, good night. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, right? Because the applause later better be as good as the applause was just now. Apparently my introduction is a tough act to follow. To the Bravermans, thank you for that beautiful introduction, and thank you for 30 years of love. I'm happy to say over the years we run into each other at conferences or services or what have you, and you're always so full of love and grace. and I appreciate you both. And I did not know the story of the 9/11 healing service, which is a reminder to all of us, the rabbis, cantors, ministers, figures, religious clergy in the room. We don't often know the seeds we plant and the lives we touch and the way that they will live on in ways that we may never realize. So thank you for that gift. Rabbi Glickman, it's an honor to be in your congregation. I appreciate very much your hospitality and your grace and your leadership. Thank you for having me. And our colleague, Rabbi Shefrin and Shana, are not able to be here tonight, but they're watching. Is that the camera? Where's the camera? So everybody turn around and wave. Say, hi, Michael. Hi, Shana. And, I don't want to overblow the case, but it got around that this was happening, and the link got shared a lot. Now, I know that probably means, people are at home, multitasking. You actually have to sit and behave yourselves. There's a lot of people who are, doing other things while we're having this conversation. But to everybody who's watching on the live stream, whether you're here in the great state of Florida or throughout North America or even in Israel, thank you for logging. Well, actually, not in Israel. I can tell you right now the time in Israel because I landed at 1 a.m. today from Tel Aviv. So on my body clock right now, I think it's 3 o'clock in the morning. So nobody's logging in from Israel. And if I fall asleep in the middle of this thing, it's not boring. I'm just tired. If you fall asleep, it's boring. So I'm going to be watching you very, very carefully. Yaja Brown, what can I say about you? How many of you know Yaja? How many of you are about to hear about the most spectacular human you've never met? Yaja Brown is the child of Holocaust survivors who was herself a refugee. Yaja knows the dangers of anti-Semitism, of the hatred of Jews, of the demonization of Israel, and the threats to our people. But Yaja Brown is somebody who has led her entire life knowing personally and viscerally the dangers of hatred and the targeting of Jews in particular, and has stood in the face of that with one clear commitment, and that is love. Everybody say love. Love. Everybody say love. Love. Okay, so here's what I tell you. So Yaja, who is all about love, the love of the Jewish people, the love of all people everywhere, who sees in the migrants, the refugees, the asylum seekers, and undocumented people today, some of whom are literally hiding somewhere in Sarasota and not going out because they're afraid of being rounded up. She sees in them herself. Her experience of oppression led her to the empathy, the love, everybody say love, love. The love of the other. And of course, her beloved, Donald, who we miss so terribly. When Yaja asked me, would I be what I hope is the first of many speakers, but at least for now, I'm the first annual, I just made a commitment, Brenner, for your congregation, the first annual lecture, talk, conversation in memory and honor of the great Donald. It is your love, Yaja. Now, so here's the thing. So she asked me to do this, and I, of course, immediately said, Hineni, here I am. Yaja, anything you want, anything to remember Donald. And she sent me the proposed topic. Do you remember what the first it said, confronting hate and bigotry and darkness. And I said, no, Yaja, this is so on you. How about we focus on leaning into love, even when there is hate and darkness? Let's remember, can you all hear me if I get out from behind there? Can you still hear me? Well, if you can't hear me, you don't know that. So thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. Okay, I'll try and behave myself and not, I won't get too close, don't worry. So if it's about love, we got to be near each other, right? So Dr. King famously said what about love and hate and light and dark? Dr. King basically said, hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Just as darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. So this is the proposition of this evening. In a moment in not just the history of the United States of America on the verge of its 250th birthday, not just in our beloved 70-year-old Israel, but across the globe, we are seeing unprecedented levels of hate and bigotry and suffering. But for 3,000 years, the Jewish tradition, in times of darkness and in hate, have turned to the very core central teachings that are contained in the scrolls behind me, but live in the actions and the lives of this community, this congregation, not only the 1.8 million Reformed Jews, I'd actually say 2.1 million. We can explain later why. But also the whole of the beloved community that Dr. King imagined, who actually center love in our tradition and in our commitments. And I want to share a little bit tonight with you, first about our tradition and what it has to say about love, and then a little bit about what we're actually experiencing in the world and what we can do as Reformed Jews and as people who care. So parenthetical side note, where are my interfaith family? I know we have figures religious, members of some of the local churches and other religious communities. Let us recognize you. Can we celebrate our interfaith clergy and leaders who've joined us tonight? Because we cannot do this alone. And before I jump into the work, let me also acknowledge, she doesn't know I'm going to do this, but Dr. Cheryl Gutman, who is the former chair of the Commission on Social Action, which is the policy body, the hundreds of rabbis, cantors, educators, lay leaders from across the Reform movement who actually do the leadership work of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism and the whole URJ. It is a really important and special and highly paid position. Ask Ernie. So, Cheryl, it's an honor that you're here with us tonight, and thank you for your leadership as well. So, you know the famous story when Rabbi Hillel and Rabbi Shammai are both asked, teach me the whole Torah on one foot. Do you know that? How many of you know the story? How many of you don't know the story? Oh, great. It's a good one, right? For those of you that know it. So Shammai knows it's a ridiculous question. The whole Torah on one foot? It would take a year to get through the whole Torah cycle reading. And studying it could take a lifetime. So what did Shammai do to the person who asked the question? He beat him with a stick. He beat him away with a stick and he ran away. Hillel was a much more loving, embracing, outreach type rabbi. And Hillel said famously, the whole Torah, what is hateful to you, do not do to any person. The rest is commentary. Go and learn it. Now here's the genius of what Hillel was doing. He didn't stop after what's hateful to you, don't do to any person. He said the rest is commentary, go and learn it. So it's a call to study. And I appreciate in the introduction, what was lifted up was that this is not just about some kind of political agenda. This is not just about social change. It's not just about all the things in the world that are broken. It is. But it is about a 3,000-year-old enduring commitment rooted in our biblical text, the prophets and the rabbis who came after to teach us and call us to action. And Hillel is saying, loving your neighbor is not enough. It's also important to know the text. But he starts with loving your neighbor. And the proof text that he offers is the text from Leviticus, V'yahavta re'echa kamocha. Everybody say, V'yahavta re'echa kamocha. Which means, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Which, by the way, assumes love isn't something we're just supposed to have for other people. Love is something we have to start by loving ourselves. And that if the world were a world in which people loved themselves more and loved their neighbors more, then it would be a much more compassionate and empathetic universe. But for Hillel, that's the core commitment of being a Jew, is to love. If you had to boil down the Torah to one thing, it is look at the other human. Everybody turn to your neighbor. Turn to your neighbor right now and say, I love you. Now turn to your other neighbor. Say, I love you. Okay, hey, hold on. No, stop loving so much. No. I'll tell you why. That was the easy part. Okay, but a lot of you are sitting next to a spouse. By the way, if that's the first time you've said I love you to that person, that's the therapy will happen at dessert. That's the easy part. One time in Torah, it says love your neighbor as you love yourself. But 36 times, 36 different ways, it says you shall love the stranger because you were a slave in Egypt. So here's what I want to tell you, and this is, they say that every rabbi, tell me, I have a bunch of rabbis in the room, tell me if you've heard this one before. Every rabbi has the same sermon, they just give it over and over again differently. Is that fair? Does this sound familiar to people? So the good news is, because I'm not a pulpit rabbi, I don't have to change my sermon every Friday night. Brett, you should try it, Rabbi Glickman. It's very convenient. This is the Torah of my soul, what I'm about to share. I've often asked myself, why is it the Fakakta Jews care so much about social justice? Why do we care so deeply about the suffering of those in the world around us? Why is it that our hearts break every time we see somebody who is crushed by the oppression of poverty or homelessness, or is struggling with a broken healthcare system, or is a refugee or migrant? Why do our hearts break? And the answer that I've come to after years of thinking about this is based on a kind of a funny sociological phenomenon. Do you know that the data tell us the number one thing that most Jews do, if they don't do anything else, it's not going to Shabbat services, all due respect to the rabbis and the cantor. It isn't going back for Yom Kippur. It's not even, going to a bar mitzvah. The one thing most Jews do is, can you guess? Passover Seder. And not just Jews. A lot of non-Jews go to Seders a lot. Once early in my rabbinate, I was a rabbi in Boston. I have some Boston family here. Hello, Boston. And I hosted the then governor of Massachusetts for my Seder, Deval Patrick, who's a wonderful, wonderful friend of the Jewish community. And this is what I do. Every year the Seder, it's like the United Nations at my table. My kids, it drives them nuts. They're like, who's coming this year? And so I put the governor next to me, and I'm going very slowly and explaining everything to the guy. I don't want him to get left behind. I'm like, so Governor Patrick, now we're going to ask the 4 questions. And he interrupts and he says, Jonah, you think this is my first Seder? He could have let it. So what happens if the number one thing that most Jews do is gather with our family and reenact a drama, which the rabbi said that every Jew is commanded to tell their child on that day so that their child will see themselves as if they themselves had been a slave in Egypt, and they themselves benefited from God reaching out with an outstretched arm and a mighty hand and lifting us up out of oppression and getting to be liberated and free people and journey to the Holy Land. To see ourselves as if we were slaves in Egypt, that calls for radical empathy. It's the Jewish story that we tell ourselves over and over again. And it is the retelling of that story in the Passover Haggadah experience that undergirds the commandment 36 different times, 36 different ways that says, because you were a slave in Egypt, you shall love the stranger. Now, what I don't know is it 36 times more important than loving your neighbor to love a stranger? Or is it 36 times more difficult to see the other, the stranger, the one who is not like you, the one who does not vote like you, the one who does not look like you, the one who does not pray like you, the one who might endanger and engender fear from you, and say, despite all that, I'm called to love you because I know what it is to be oppressed, to be a stranger. The Torah text is very clear about the categories of who the stranger are. It's not limited just to the conception of the other. Again and again, it says we are to protect the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and open our hand to the poor. Think about that for a second. The categories that the Torah describes are the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and the poor. What do they have in common? What is those 4 categories, what do they have in common? They're the most vulnerable. They don't benefit in this ancient Near Eastern milieu from a patriarchal protection of the tribe. They're outside of what provides protection and support and guarantee. The widow who doesn't have in that ancient context the benefit of a husband to care. an orphan who doesn't have parents to care, a stranger who is an outsider and doesn't have the tribe to care, and the poor person who doesn't have the resources for anybody to be able to care. And God tells us through our ancient text over and over again, that's who you ought to be concerned about. Now, they say that there are two kinds of Jews, the Passover Jew and the Purim Jew. Have you heard about this? Yossi Klein Halevi, brilliant author, developed this conception. Who are the Passover Jews? I'm going to have some water while you think about it. Thank you, Rabbi Glickman. I appreciate it. What vintage is this? It's got a great after thing that happens. Sorry, if my voice holds out for the whole night, we'll be good. The Passover Jew is the Jew who sees themselves in this framework about being for the other. And so they're the social justice Jew. They're the run to the soup kitchen Jew. They're the show up at an ICE facility and protest Jew. The Jew who advocates. And it's the Yaja Brown Jew. It's the Michelle Iger Jew. Michelle Iger, by the way, who is the head of RAC Florida, who is my colleague at the URJ. And the end of tonight, by the way, is going to be a call to action where I'm going to say, if you liked what you heard tonight and you care, as Rabbi Glickman said, you want to get involved, you can definitely talk to Vicki, who's the chairperson here. But not everybody's from Temple Emanu-El. So you should introduce yourself to Michelle Iger, who will tell you how you can get involved. These are the Passover Jews. But Klein Halevi says there are some people who are the Purim Jews. So what happened in the story of Purim? Haman, you've got them well trained, Rabbi. I'm impressed. Haman tried to kill us. Esther and Mordecai saved us. Let's eat. And that is a repeating motif. But here's the thing. So the Purim Jews, the analysis goes, is we have to protect ourselves. We have to be for ourselves. How can we be for others when we are under attack? Well, there are two kind of ways that I want to think about this. The first is if you're thoughtful about the Haman character, the Pharaoh character, the characters who attack us and who hate us, the Amaleks. Everybody say Amalek. How many of you know Haman? How many of you know Pharaoh? How many of you know Amalek? Oh, you got some Torah study Jews here. So Amalek is one of those characters we're supposed to blot out his name. Before there was a Haman, there was an Amalek. The tradition of blotting out Haman's name was because Amalek attacked us. When? From behind. So what happens is we're slaves in Egypt. We are crushed by Egyptian bondage for 300 years. Finally, Moses and Miriam and all of our elders organize us. We rise up, make it through the Sea of Reeds, 10 plagues. We're finally free. Everybody cheer because we're free. Yay! And Amalek attacks. And Amalek, famously in the text, attacked the rear. And he destroyed who? The stragglers. Those who were not able to keep up, the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and the poor, the infirmed, people with disabilities. So one might think, if you're a Purim Jew, you want to be about self-defense against the Amaleks, or against the Hamans, or against the Pharaoh. But the Hasidic masters have a beautiful teaching about Amalek. In the Hasidic literature, we're scolded and said, no, it's not the sin of Amalek who attacked at the rear, it's the sin of the children of Israel. And why? We allowed there to be stragglers at the rear. Even the Purim Jew has to acknowledge, as much as we want to be angry at Amalek, or blot out Haman, or disdain Pharaoh, it starts with loving yourself. And loving the self doesn't just mean ego, it means protecting. It means looking at the other, the stranger, the most vulnerable, and putting them at the center of the camp. This week's Torah portion. Are we still good with some Torah? Can I do one more? Sure. If you run out of patience, you let me know. You'll be walking out the doors. I'll know you're running out of patience. What's this week's Torah portion? Vayera, thank you. Vayera. On the one hand, was that Jack? No. Great Torah portion. In many ways, every week is a social justice Torah portion because, side note, I'm friendly with a Christian pastor who has this fun Bible that he likes to show people. And it's his version, so it's got, both the Hebrew Bible and, the other part. Sorry, guys. It's got both parts. And he says, what I did was I took this Bible and I took a Sharpie and I blacked out all of the political parts, all the social justice parts, and and then he shows it to you, it's almost all black. Right? Because so much of our text and our tradition is a call to action about fixing that which is broken. So in this week's Torah portion, God says, shall I tell Abraham what I am to do with the wicked people of Sodom and Gomorrah? Do you know the story? Sodom and Gomorrah are so replete with wickedness and injustice and oppression and crime, God is going to destroy them all. And God says, before I do this, Abraham's my guy. I better admit to him what I'm going to do. So God says to Abraham, listen, Abraham, there's so many, it's corrupt, it's wicked, I'm going to destroy them. And Abraham says, wait a second. Would the God of righteousness and justice and mercy, would that God destroy the innocent along with the guilty? God's like, no, I guess I shouldn't do that. But they're so wicked, it's overflowing with corruption. Well, what if there are 50? 50 innocents. Okay, God says, for 50. Well, Abraham says, what about 40? Okay, what about 30? What about 10? What about 20? What about 10? This is this classic tale of speaking truth to power. It becomes the template, the paradigm for what Jews do. Going back to the way I started the premise, why is it that the Fakakta Jews are so concerned about social and economic justice, about a society in which all people thrive? V'ahavta re'echa, your neighbor, love your neighbor, but also love the stranger, 36 different times. How was Abraham connected to Sodom and Gomorrah? He was connected by family and the actual people of Sodom. Were they following God? They were not even of his tribe. They were connected through him through family. They were Sodom and Gomorrah. The Sodomites and the Gomorrites are the ultimate other. It's another example of actually loving the stranger. But here's the thing. Abraham is able to speak truth to power and argue with God in the context of a relationship around trying to bring about light and love into the universe. Think about the original call. Last week, what was the parsha? Lech Lecha. It goes Noach, Lech Lecha, then Vayera. Lech Lecha, God says to Sarah and Abraham, what? Go forth. Lech Lecha, and you shall be a blessing. Think about it for a second. Ooh, that's all right. Maybe it's a message from on high. If it's for me, tell him I'll call him back. You got it. What does it mean to be a blessing? How many of you have grandchildren? How many of you have been part of a blessing of your grandchild? Right? Think about the love of a blessing. The opportunity. Like, now I'm a rabbi, so I get to bless people a lot. It's nice, right, rabbis? And cantor. It's a blessing is the ultimate act of love. You shall be a blessing. But then God doesn't stop there. So here, this thing you're going to go do, you're going to go off to the promised land, a land you've never seen. You're going to take this incredible risk because you're going to be a blessing. And God doesn't stop there. And what's going to happen as a result of the blessing that they are going to be? The nations of the world shall be blessed by you. How do you say nations in Hebrew? The goyim. The goyim. It's a yicky word in one historical context, but in our text it's actually a beautiful conception. That we are to be, as Jews, a blessing, not just because we're narcissistic and want it for ourselves. It's so that the world will be blessed by us. The other nations will be blessed by us. All of the goyim, the nations of the world. Isaiah said, you shall be a light unto the nations, the goyim. This is our work. This is what we do. And right now, it feels very, very hard. How many of you have concerns about what's happening in our country right now? How many of you have concerns about what's happening in Israel right now? Okay. I don't mean to make anyone feel uncomfortable. Maybe you don't. It's okay. So, let me start with what's hard, and then let's end with what's joyful and what's possible. First, the anti-Semitism and the threat to Jews, for all of the Purim Jews that are sitting here, is real, full stop. And the anti-Semitism and the hatred of Jews that we are experiencing is what Deborah Lipstadt, who is the former international ambassador to combat anti-Semitism, calls the horseshoe of anti-Semitism. Have people heard this framework? So on one end of the horseshoe is the kind of anti-Semitism that we kind of like saw in the Tree of Life massacre. We saw in the Jews Will Not Replace Us, with neo-Nazi goons marching with, tiki torches and assault rifles. By the way, they went to a Reform congregation that morning when they were having Shabbat services, your sister congregation in Charlottesville, and stood outside with their guns on the same weekend as the Jews Will Not Replace Us. This is the white supremacist threat. It is as anti-black racist and Confederate-loving as it is anti-Semitic. And by the way, they were marching around a Confederate statue saying it. And it's all about, and the attack of the Tree of Life Synagogue clearly was around the fact that the synagogue was a HIAS, Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, refugee solidarity congregation. And the attacker believed in the replacement lie. I'm not even going to call it a theory, that it's the replacement. Do you know the replacement lie? Right? That Jews are part of a global conspiracy to turn America black, brown, and Muslim through immigration policy and voting rights. Actually, we care about immigration and voting rights because we believe in a just and compassionate society where we have a multiracial, inclusive democracy. That's actually why we show up so much around protecting immigrants and we protect democracy. And we're going to come back to democracy in a minute. But that's one end of the horseshoe. The other end of the horseshoe is related to both October 7th, where we saw literally the worst massacre of Jewish people since the Holocaust. How many of you have been back to Israel since October 7th? I have been 3 times to Kfar Aza, to Kibbutz Be'eri, to the Novik Music Festival, to bear witness, to see for myself. I haven't walked through the valley of the shadow of death like I did when I walked through the Gaza envelope. It reminds me of the way my grandma Fanny would describe the pogroms that she escaped in Europe, with the blood still not dry. It was really, really bad. Lest we think there isn't a world of Hamas and other people who hate us and want to kill us. I'm being honest because I don't want to be dismissed as some idealistic, hold hands, sing songs like everything's okay. It's hard. And by the way, I should say as a parenthetical side note, in 1995, when I was a graduate student at Hebrew University, I missed the 26 bus on my way to Hebrew University at Scopus. And the next bus that I got on was about 5 minutes behind it, and the first bus that I missed was bombed by a Hamas suicide bomber. And my classmate, Joan Devaney, was killed. So I am not some naive kumbaya peacenik. I made a decision in 1995 that Hamas would not steal my humanity. And I'm standing here tonight saying, 30 years later, I'm still not willing to let Hamas steal my humanity. I still believe what that text tells us, that we are to love the stranger, even when there are people who want to kill us. It's really, really hard. And in the United States, on October 7th, I was a visiting scholar at Harvard Divinity School. So I was at Harvard. I had 1 kid at Georgetown, 1 kid at Pomona, and 1 kid at Wesleyan. Yes, I'm the father of 4 tuitions. Thank you very much. So the anti-Semitism on campuses is real. Like, this is not a thing we can just be like, oh, that's not a thing. And I actually knew Yaron Lashinsky and Sarah Milgram because I work in Washington and I represent the reform movement at the Israeli embassy. Sarah Milgram was the young woman who was working on helping the government of Israel document the sexual assault and the gender-based violence on October 7th. And the event she was at with her beloved Yaron was a humanitarian gathering to think about how to get humanitarian aid into Gaza. So they were murdered. People in the press, it was Israeli staff members murdered, as if to say, like, well, they were murdered because they were Israeli. No, they were Jews at a Jewish event. Yaron wasn't even Jewish. He was Jewish adjacent. And I forgot her name, Diamond, Karen Diamond, an 80-something-year-old woman, I think a Holocaust survivor, who was just showing up to protest for hostages, was firebombed and murdered. And of course, the governor of Pennsylvania's Passover Seder was firebombed. So the threat is real. All of that is true. Full stop. And it is also true that we are seeing at this moment, in the name of protecting Jews and keeping Jews safe, the degradation of democratic norms, attacks on democratic institutions, and government-sponsored actions that anybody who knows the history of the Holocaust, when we see masked and unidentifiable agents of the state rounding people up because they fit a profile that is an ethnic profile. And let me tell you, today it may be my brown sister that looks like she might be from Colombia or Mexico. Tomorrow, it'll be my Jewish sister. Because if we've learned anything from history as Jews, first they came for who? And I didn't say anything because I wasn't a what. And then they came for who? But I wasn't a, and then they came for the Jews. We know this. But I want to say in the positive, what actually has kept Jews safe and what we are fighting for in the reality of anti-Semitism is a multiracial, inclusive democracy where everybody is safe. So let me put this a little bit in historical context. How many of you have read the letter of the Rhode Island Jewish community, led by Mr. Sexton, to President George Washington? How many of you have no idea what I'm talking about? I urge you, later, not now, because you're listening to me now, to go on your phones and Google it. So this is in 1790. Okay, 1790. We're about to celebrate the 250th anniversary of the founding of our country, and there'll be a real conversation about what this country is and what it looks like and what our Declaration of Independence means and what it's for. And it's important to reflect on this history. In 1790, President Washington is trying to drive through the Constitution. It's not yet passed, and Rhode Island is a holdout. So he's going to go to Rhode Island to get them to ratify the Constitution. So the leader of the Jewish community, Mr. Sexton, writes a letter to President Washington on behalf of the children of Abraham. That's what we called ourselves. Why do you think he called himself the children of Abraham and not the Jews? Old Testament. He's trying to say to a Christian president in a Christian country, we're like you. And in the letter, on behalf of the children of Abraham, he says, we, the children of Abraham, are wondering, will this be a country that gives bigotry no sanction and persecution? Oh, I garbled the quote. Oh, there must be somebody who knows it by heart. No comfort, sorry. That gives bigotry no comfort and persecution no sanction or are we doing okay so far? You'll forgive me for, again, it's 4 a.m. now in Israel. David Saperstein is probably watching on the live stream, Cheryl, and going like, he got the George Washington quote wrong. And the president famously wrote back and then gave an address in which first he said, you don't need to come to me as supplicants because you're citizens. In other words, you're not some other. You don't have to ask for rights, which is what used to happen in Europe. Think about it. We, not just in Europe, throughout 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple and the exile, Jews living in foreign lands would have to ask the prince or the czar or the pharaoh or whoever for special rights because we were other. George Washington says, in his own words, you can look it up, you're Americans. And this will be a country that gives bigotry no sanction and persecution no comfort. That's the bedrock principle that is nearly 250 years old. Fast forward, the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism comes into being more than 60 years ago. How many of you know the origin story of our Religious Action Center? Okay, you're about to hear an incredible story that will make the case of why, when we see anti-Semitism, when we understand that we're at risk, we lean into democracy. multiracial, and multi-faith. So our founder, a member of the Board of Trustees of the Reform Movement, what was then called the UAHC, now the URJ, Kivy Kaplan, who was also a trustee of his synagogue, Temple Israel in Boston. I love the place. I happen to have been a rabbi there. I never met Kivy. When Kivy Kaplan, as a young man, typical story, probably this will sound familiar, family of immigrants, came to this country from Eastern Europe with nothing. They had nothing. He started a leather business, and guess what? He got rich, and he became very philanthropic and very charitable. He had two priorities in his philanthropy. One was to his beloved Reform movement and his synagogue, but the other priority was developed when he was a young man, and he and his newlywed wife, Emily, went on their honeymoon. Michelle, don't step on my punchlines. So I love you, my Sarasota family, and even my Sun City family. Guess where they went on their honeymoon? Where? Florida. Now, this was a different time, although history moves in mysterious cyclical ways. He's driving around with his wife, Emily, being driven around by a taxi driver, and they keep going to places, and they keep seeing the same sign over and over again. Can you imagine what the sign said? No Jews, no dogs. Kivy and Emily, coming from the Northeast as they were, by the way, there was anti-Semitism. It's not like there isn't anti-Semitism in the North. It just looked different. This they had never seen. So they turned to the taxi driver, who was black. So Kivy and Emily are white Jews. The taxi driver is black and Christian. And they say to the driver, like, what is this? Is this common down here? And the driver looked at them and said, they don't even bother with us. It was at that moment that Kivy and Emily had a kind of an awakening where they realized what Dr. King was trying to say. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If you oppress or you crush one minority, you are crushing and oppressing all of us. That what the experience of a black taxi driver in Florida was not disconnected to a white Jewish family in Florida. And so he went home and said, I'm going to get involved, and he became involved in the NAACP. He got so involved, he was actually the president of the NAACP, which was, in its founding, a coalition, by the way, founded decades before in response to the lynching plague, by white Jews and black Christians. Parenthetical side note, there are many, many black Jews. 10% of the American Jewish community is not white. We have black Jews, brown Jews, Latino Jews, Asian Jews, Mizrahi Jews, Sephardi Jews. We got Jews of all hues. So I don't want to play into because I don't want people to see and think, oh, white Jews, black Jews, but this was who this was in that moment in history. And that was what the coalition was. When Kivy Kaplan in his 70s stepped down as the president, he was the last white Jewish president of the NAACP. But I have a board seat. I sit on the board and I'm an active member of the NAACP, all because of a historic seat from Kivy Kaplan to Rabbi David Saperstein, who was my predecessor at the RAC, to today. The other thing that Kivy Kaplan did was bought an embassy-sized building in DuPont Circle in our nation's capital and donated it to the Reform Jewish movement. Not to be a JCC. He said, I'll give you this gift with one condition. Remember, this is the Jim Crow era. If you use it as the hub for the civil rights movement. So our founding director, Rabbi Dick Hirsch, called his dear friend, a young, charismatic pastor, and said, Martin, good news. You have an office. Remember, Dr. King had a church in Atlanta. He didn't have an office in Washington. So when Dr. King would come to D.C. to conspire with the other luminaries of the civil rights movement, it was in the conference room of the Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism. And not only did Rabbi Hirsch march with King in Selma, he also invited the Leadership Conference for Civil Rights, which was the organizing network of all the civil rights groups, to have their offices in our Religious Action Center, which they were housed until only about 20 more years ago when they just got too big and moved to downtown offices. But because the Leadership Conference and Dr. King were housed in our offices, The Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were drafted in our conference room. Are you proud? You should be very proud. You can clap for that. That's worth clapping for. So what does this have to do with democracy? Andrew Goodman, Mickey Schwerner, and James Chaney. What do they all have in common? They gave their lives for what? Voter registration. Yes, civil rights, absolutely. They were part of voting rights. They were registering voters. And when we think about the danger we're confronting now, they went down to Mississippi as part of Mississippi Summer just to register voters. And the Klan killed them. But what Goodman, Chaney, and Schwerner, and Rabbi Dick Hirsch, and Dr. King, and all of the luminaries understood was the beloved community, this possibility of being a multiracial interfaith society where everybody thrives, would only be guaranteed by a democracy. If we actually lived in a country where every voice was heard, it would be because every vote would count, regardless of the color of your skin or your gender identity or what district you live in. Because if we actually reflected the society that we were, then we would be a society of the rule of law in which all people would thrive and be safe. By the way, when we think about the stakes, I'm friendly with David Goodman, Andrew Goodman's little brother. He grew up in New York City, and he remembered when his brother Andrew came home one day and had to have his mother sign the permission slip to go down to Mississippi Summer. That's how young he was. So when we look at what's being done to democracy, I'll give you some examples, but I'm sure you can think of your own. Prosecuting your political rivals, threatening nonprofit organizations because they don't agree with you and investigating them, firing half the government because you don't like what they're doing, degrading democratic norms and institutions. And by the way, I am strictly nonpartisan. The RAC is strictly nonpartisan. This is descriptive of what's actually happening. We call balls and strikes. The reform movement has Republicans and we have Democrats. When this administration did everything that it could and succeeded in getting the hostages out, we celebrated that. And I had people yelling at me, how can you thank this president for anything? I said, because he did what we've all been asking somebody to do, which is bring our hostages home. And he did it. He did something I couldn't do, which is get Prime Minister Netanyahu to actually stop and focus on making a deal and getting the hostages home. So we call balls and strikes. This, to me, is a big strike. Because we know that democratic norms and institutions, like the due process of law, freedom of speech, these are the things that actually keep Jews safe. And I would even argue, if you look at the 250-year history from when the Jews of Rhode Island said, are we full citizens? What will be the protection? George Washington's answer to them, in essence, was the rights of citizenry. You're protected because we have a constitution, if you vote for it. It wasn't passed at the time. We have a rule of law. We have democratic institutions. And that's what will keep you, the children of Abraham, not being some group, some other. That's why the civil rights luminaries fought so hard for the Voting Rights Act, which, by the way, was eviscerated by the Supreme Court in 2013 in Shelby v. Holder, which is why we're now seeing the war of gerrymandering, which is a catastrophe, an absolute catastrophe. One of the thing that was eviscerated then by the court, they're looking at it again now, so they may gut the whole thing. What was gutted back in 2013, which was pre-clearance, it was the part of the Voting Rights Act that basically said if you're a state with a history of voter suppression, you can't change your voting laws without approval of the Department of Justice. Now the Department of Justice has been gutted anyway, so one wonders, what would happen there. But state after state after state started doing voter suppression laws. And one of them was so bad, a federal appeals court called it racist with surgical precision. By the way, how many of you like Ruth Bader Ginsburg? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, amazing, right? She wrote the dissent in Shelby v. Holder. Are there some powerful Jewish women in this room? Was Ruth Bader Ginsburg a powerful Jewish woman? Read her dissent. What she said was the logic of the court, Chief Justice Roberts wrote the majority, and the view of the court in Shelby v. Holder was, well, things are better now. That was, in essence, Justice Roberts. And they may roll back the entire, they just came up for oral argument about a month ago, and you can watch, I gave a speech at the Supreme Court steps. It's on Facebook if you want to see it, because they may roll back the whole thing. But at the time, Ruth Bader Ginsburg wrote this great dissent where she said, the logic of the court is as if we are standing in a rainstorm under an umbrella and saying, well, I'm not getting wet, so I don't need my umbrella anymore. Because the Voting Rights Act is the reason why, so to speak, things are better now. And because we are part of a global movement and we love our Israel, the threats to democracy are not only happening here, they're also happening in Israel. But here's the good news. I got in at 1 o'clock this morning from a World Zionist Congress in which our coalition, which was a coalition of Reform Jews, conservative Jews, and take a deep breath, modern Orthodox Jews, who collaborated together to pass no less than 30 resolutions, all committing to democratic norms and institutions in Israel, an October 7th Commission of Inquiry, gender equity, a commitment to religious pluralism and diversity, to guarantee that no funding would be sent to build settlements in Gaza, which actually has been proposed by Ben-Gvir and Smotrich and some of the extremist zealots, because we organized the democracy of the Jewish people and the diaspora, and we won. How many of you voted in the World Zionist Congress election? That's what you won. So you should celebrate that. So the hour is late. The throat is sore. Let me conclude in a moment. Where do we go from here? If the Jewish community is about light and love, then even when things are challenging and dark, we think about what we can do to bring more light and love into the universe. And there's ways that we can right now. History is not inevitable. Democracy is not partisan. There are thoughtful people who are both self-described Republicans and Democrats, progressives and conservatives, who are deeply concerned about democracy. And democracy happens right where you live. The time is now to be having conversations with boards of elections, with school boards, with library boards, with local law enforcement, sheriffs, police chiefs, and having thoughtful conversations about what can we do in a nonpartisan way to come together around protecting democratic institutions. For example, to say to local law enforcement, how will you help us protect the polls and make sure that every voice will be heard because every vote is counted? And make sure there isn't voter intimidation? How will you help bring down the volume and help us stand against federal law enforcement when they go into, is what happened yesterday or 2 days ago in Chicago? A school. ICE agents went into a school. And so those kids now in that school are traumatized, let alone the family that's impacted. By the way, you should know we in the Reform movement are part of a lawsuit suing the administration over what's called the sensitive locations policy. How many of you are following this? This is truly nonpartisan. This cuts across the religious spectrum and the partisan spectrum. Up until this last year, schools, hospitals, and congregations, i.e. churches, and synagogues and mosques, were called sensitive locations. And federal law enforcement would not enter them to, do whatever. The administration has rolled that back and said, anywhere is fair game. We would come into your sanctuary if we had to. So we joined with the United Church of Christ, the UUA, the Presbyterians, the Episcopalians, the Methodists. This is wall to wall in the faith community saying, you cannot invade our, literally the word is sanctuaries, in order to do whatever the work is that you need to do. The work of democracy happens at the grassroots level right where you are. And the work of democracy in Israel goes on. We're still waiting. Is it 6 or 8 hostages still whose bodies? I think 2 more came home. So continuing to lift our voice and leveraging the victory in the World Zionist Congress to say we're still going to stay engaged. We're going to advocate both for Israel's safety and security, but we're also going to advocate for the Israel that we can be proud of and that our children will be proud of. And the third and final thing is we can show up in a very direct way for the most vulnerable, the people who are impacted. Right now, people who are TPS holders, people who are asylum seekers, people who are refugees, who came to this country in good faith. They're not even part of the undocumented community of people who came here, quote unquote, illegally. They're people who came here because they're true refugees or asylum seekers. Those folks are afraid and they need our support and they need our solidarity. There are LGBTQ people whose identities are literally being erased. We have families in our congregation, some probably sitting in this room, whose children can no longer get gender-affirming care. Whatever your politics are about sports and who should get to play and who shouldn't, think about the health and well-being of children and how we can actually surround the families and know that they are not alone and they feel supported. And just as a reminder, when Kivi Kaplan donated our rack to our movement so that we could advocate for voting rights and civil rights, he did it out of an experience of anti-Semitism. When he saw that sign, "No Jews, no dogs," he didn't try and build a wall around the Jewish community to protect himself. He didn't start to demonize the other and scold the other for the fact that there's hatred of Jews. He reached out and said, who can be with me? Who can we keep safe by being together? His response was a response of love. His response was King's response. When there is hate, only love can drive out hate. The civil rights agenda, the voting rights agenda, is the actual policy manifestation of a community of love. That's what we're asking for folks to do. And I know after October 7th, the last 2 years, it's been really, really hard. Because some of the long-term historic allies and friends we worked with in these campaigns are not showing up for us in the way we would want them to. But as Rabbi Hillel also famously said, in a place where nobody's being a mensch, be a mensch. We do this work not only so that other people will be there for us, we do it because it's the right thing to do. And so my prayer for all of you and for all of us is that we will continue to give honor to the Torah and the Holy One who gave it to us and our ancestors, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Thank you all very much.
Wow. What an extraordinary night tonight is. You know, Rabbi Pessner, thank you for your kind words. Rabbi Glickman, thank you for remembering Donald. I want to tell everybody here that my mother did not survive the Holocaust so that I could grow to be an affluent Jew and have a little bit of fun. She survived the Holocaust so I could make a difference. And all of us sitting here today, I'm going to ask each and every one of you to join me in the march to make a difference. We're here to say thank you for being able to make differences. And the people I worked with, my committee, the Social Justice Committee, the Israel Committee, they work every day, and I want to thank each and every one of them. Dr. Vicki Lachman, Nina Levitt, unbelievable leaders. My co-chairs and co-sponsors, Fran and Jack Braverman, from start to finish, gave generously of their time and their support. We thank them all. And then we have backup people. We have an office filled with people that do what needs to be done to not only keep this synagogue running, but to help those of us that work on the committees. Christine Elliott and her staff are incredible. And of course, where would any of us be without our rabbis, without Rabbi Glickman and our entire rabbinical team? Through their spiritual leadership, we learn that embracing the concepts of Torah leads us on the paths of justice, on the paths of making a difference, to tikkun olam, repairing the world. And before I go any further, I have one more thank you. The thank you is to Donald Brown of blessed memory. Donald, who said to me, Yaja, Sarasota needs to hear from and learn from Rabbi Jonah Pessner today. Let's sponsor him at Temple Emanu-El. Donald would have been so proud of Rabbi Pessner and of everybody here. So we sit here in solidarity in our belief that this country, the USA, and Israel, the country which holds so many of our hearts, can indeed be places where all peoples can live in proximity, sharing space and allowing each to practice their ideals. Thank you, Rabbi Pessner, again, for coming here tonight to lead us on that path, to arm us with the tools and resources to fight hate, to rail against injustice, to welcome the stranger, to use love as our guiding light. Thank you, Rabbi, for allowing us to take action with the rack, to stand tall and not be silent. And thank you to each and every person sitting in this sanctuary and those of you who are joining us online.